everyone. Welcome to another edition of the AuctionChatter podcast, and another episode where I'm joined by Moshe Maimon, and we'll be discussing another auction catalog. This one, the Taj Art Auction 13, which will take place Sunday, April 7th at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. And we've discussed a number of auction catalogs recently, and I've had a lot of fun doing them, and Moshe has, and I hope that the listeners have as well. I want to just mention here at the outset that this podcast episode is sponsored by Taj Art. So thank you to them for sponsoring it. But that being said, while we are obviously discussing the catalog, and there is a really beautiful catalog, like their last one, was mentioning to somebody recently, a friend of mine stopped me over Shabbos, and he said, what are you doing next? And I said, I'm talking about auction house. He's like, it's just a paid promotion. And I will say that, well, like I said, this is a paid promotion in the sense that Taj Art is paying for this. I think for us, for myself, for Moshe, it allows us the opportunity to discuss Sfarim and historical tidbits and nuggets, and to jump all over the place in Jewish history and talk about Sfarim and interesting historical episodes. And I don't view it as merely just shilling for an auction house, and I think that it gives us the opportunity to do a paid advertisement while having a lot of fun and giving a lot of historical information and things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So I hope that you do enjoy it. That's the point of me saying this introduction. I hope that it is something you enjoy. And again, I'm always looking for feedback. So you can email me, sfarmchatter@gmail.com. If you're on the WhatsApp chat, you see my number, you can message me there directly and let me know what you think.
Yes, Nachi, thank you very much for the nice introduction. I agree with you. I think this is besides for being, good publicity for the auction house, and I hope it is, but it's also an opportunity for listeners to get a different kind of podcast where there's shorter, more topical discussions of a wide array of subjects rather than one in-depth treatment of a specific sefer topic or author. So, people may like this format, they may like the other format, and sometimes, and we know it has grown for us into larger podcasts, and if people like a smaller segment and they want to see it more fully treated, they can always be in touch with you, and we can oblige them. So, but this is, I enjoy doing these. I'm sure there are also listeners who enjoy it as well, and I very much grateful for their feedback.
So, one other thing before we get started, something that I did last time, and I did get feedback the last auction we did, and we did get feedback that people like better, is we'll try to be a little, I don't want to say shorter, but we're going to try to discuss specific items, and we're not going to really run through other items. We're not going to just mention, like, the catalog is beautiful. There really is some fascinating material. There will be a link in the show's notes to view the entire catalog. It's on BidSpirit. I advise you go and check it out and really see all the items. But we're not going to discuss all the items. We're going to discuss specific items. And maybe at the end, I'll go rapid fire, discuss some of the interesting items. And obviously, there's a lot more to talk about. We can't talk about everything. But we picked a number of items, and everything else, listeners should check out. So with that, the first item that I will go against what I just said, because I'm referencing back to the last podcast we did for Taj Art, is Lot 2, which is Ibr Shanim by Rabbi Sachar ben Susan. And that one, last time, Taj had a manuscript of this item, and with new additions from the Mechaber. So I will refer you back to that episode, and you can read up more on, you can listen to more about it over there. So we'll start off with Lot 3 with Moshe. I'll turn it over to you with the Shalos Shuvas Marlbach, the edition printed in Venice in 1565. This is Reb Levi ibn Chaviv, the son of the Yaakov, the Rav in Yerushalayim. Famously, in the back of this, there's the Kuntres HaSmicha. There was the famous Smicha controversy that erupted in Eretz Yisrael between the Mari Rav and the base of Karo was involved, and the Al Sheikh and many others were involved at Tzfas and Yerushalayim. They wanted to restart Smicha, and so that really deserves its own podcast in and of itself. But anyways, this is the Chuvas Marlbach.
Yeah, just to be short, Marlbach is this sefer in particular. This sefer, this Chuvas Marlbach, this first print, and this copy is a beautiful, wide-margined, pristine copy, excellent copy. But this sefer is essential, absolutely essential for anyone who, first of all, is interested in a pivotal achron, absolutely pivotal in the halachic development of his time, but even more so for someone who's interested in the history, just the sheer history of the rebirth of Yerushalayim. He was the Rav. He's responsible for bringing it back. He had to fend off different attempts that would have devastated the community, and it's only because of his leadership, his foresight, his talents that guided Yerushalayim and eventually, paving the way for the old yeshiv and then the new yeshiv. So it's pivotal, historical and halachic sefer Maharil Bach himself, brilliant man. He is trained in the Shita of the old Spanish, Rebizla Kampantin is Darkei Gemara, which has parallels to the Pilpul going on in Europe at the time, but much more much more text-based, and also much more halacha-oriented. Maharil Bach, probably more of a halachist, more of a paisik than a mefarish, but his tshuvas do have pirushim in there, so you do see that on display as well. But a very independent thinker, somewhat combative. He's involved in all the halachic disputes of his time. He's fighting most often with his famous bar plukta in the smicha controversy. That's Mahari Beirav, but he just gets involved in everything, and it's very easy to identify with his position. He lays it out very clearly, very cogently, very eloquently. It's so this sefer, unique in many regards, and all that halachic controversies all in this sefer. A terrific sefer. Just a word, to be short, just a word about the Mahadura. This edition, Reb Shlomo Zalman Havlin spent a lot of years researching Tshuvas Maharil Bach. He was going to put his out, and then another edition preempted him, but he ended up publishing his research anyway. But the introduction is what's very important. And his introduction, he discusses that having reviewed countless copies, maybe 30 or so copies or more of this edition, and he discovered that they were as they were printing it, they were constantly changing it and updating it. So they tried to keep as many pages as they could the same, but of the 400 or so original pages, he says there's variations in about 90 of them throughout that year of printing. Printing wasn't a couple-day process. It was a long process by hand, but they were constantly, moving it. It was longer because the Magia had added a lot of notes, and they were shortening it by taking out those notes, and then they had to rearrange the words so not to affect the pagination as much as possible. So there's a lot of... he says that he never, he still hasn't published his official, critical survey of the difference in all the variation, all the variations, but there are a lot. So this sefer may be very important from that. I don't know if this is the one of those that he has reviewed or not, but again, these a crucial sefer for his time. It's an absolute classic.
Yeah. So that edition of Shlomo Halvin, he does relay some of the issues that he had with the other edition being put out, but that edition, he does talk about this. It's very fascinating. Lot 6 is Pirkei Moshe, by Moshe Al Masnino on Pirkei Avos. This is the first edition, 1563. So this is interesting. And just to mention briefly, Moshe Al Masnino, that there's a new edition was done by Mechon HaKtav many years ago, not around, and they didn't really do it, just reprinted it. But what Ramesh Al-Masnino was a major darshan, Mametz Koach, and his other drushes were redone by Avat Shalom, and he was famous for his rabbi in Salonika. He was in Greece, and he was the for those who are familiar with Donna Gracia Nasi, Mendez Nasi, and her nephew Don Joseph, and they were Ramesh Al-Masnino, there was like a shul there, and he was kind of supported by them. He was hired by them. He talks about them a lot. So that's just briefly who he is. Really, there's actually been 2 biographies out on him. One is Harama Misalanika, I think, by Professor Shaul Regev. There's another book by Meir Tzvi Benaya, who put out another biography on him. So there's been a lot of research done on him. A very important and not really well-known figure from the 16th century. And this is a beautiful copy of his commentary on Pirkei Avos. That is Lot 6. And again, well, maybe I'll go rapid fire at the end with some of these items. There are some really just beautiful items just to look at, classics that you should check out online. So we'll jump to Lot 17, which is Meiser Akech on the Rambam. This is the Venice edition, 1742. But what's interesting about this one is that this is the copy of Rav Tzvi Hirsch Lerin, and it has his signature on the title page that you can see. If you look at the picture, you can see a very nice title page with pictures. By the way, Moshe and Aaron, a lot of these farm had Moshe and Aaron. This one does not have Moshe with horns. Some of the farm have Moshe with horns. But it has his signature. And Tzvi Lerin, the Lerin family was in charge of the Pekidim V'Amarkalim in Amsterdam. I'll turn this over to you, Moshe, but this is something that originally, we talked about this in the Chida, on the Magal Toy episode, where originally it was in Constantinople, we do the collecting for Eretz Yisrael, and then eventually gets turned over to Amsterdam, the Pekidim V'Amarkalim. And you can talk about them a little more. And that's who Tzvi Hirsch Lerin, the signator on this Meiser Akech volume is.
Yeah, excellent. It's, first of all, the sefer itself is a very important sefer. The Meiser Akech on the Rambam from Rabbi Masud Chai Rakach. It's a very systematic pirush on the Rambam, which includes a lot of manuscript information from Avram ben Rambam and others. He has a section at the beginning of things that he had culled from manuscript. He translated some Arabic manuscripts, so it's an important original work on the Rambam. This is the first print. That's an important sefer in and of itself. And the signature of Reb Tzvi Hirsch Laren is also very significant, like as you said, because Reb Tzvi Hirsch is an important, very important figure for his time, particularly so for the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael, because he is the head of the Pekidim V'Amarkelim. Pekidim V'Amarkelim is an Amsterdam-based central clearinghouse for all the money collected in Europe before it would go to Eretz Yisrael. Again, there was a lot of confusion before, in the Chida's times in the mid 1700s with the collections for Eretz Yisrael, with monies being unaccounted for and unscrupulous people posing as a shliach and pocketing the money. So it was very difficult. They needed a central authority, and the Pekidim V'Amarkelim of Amsterdam filled that role. Amsterdam, in the Chida's times, was the Ir Ve'em V'Yisrael, one of the most important Western European cities. At the time of Tzvi Hirsch Laren, in the early 1800s, Amsterdam is already declining. The city itself does not have the same role it used to, but Tzvi Hirsch and the Pekidim V'Amarkelim certainly make it the main destination for anyone involved in the Yishuv. And it's this organization wins the esteem of all the Rabbanim from across the spectrum. The Chassam Sofer writes there, Tzvi Hirsch in laudatory terms, as does the Ksav Sofer, and all the Rabbanim do. Sephardic and Ashkenazic, they all held Tzvi Hirsch, who is independently wealthy as a banker and also an accomplished Talmud Chacham. He's a paragon of virtue and a very important figure. So this is a Chashuva Sefer with a very Chashuva signature.
Yeah, and that is lot 17. Lot 20 is a beautiful item, very cool item. Lot 20 is a Chanukah Sabayis by Moshe Chayfetz. This is the second Beis HaMikdash. The Taisis Yom Tov has the third Beis HaMikdash, and it seems like this is what a lot of Moshe Chayfetz based is on, but this is published in 1696 in Venice. This is a complete copy with the map, with the illustration of They call it a map here. It's not a map. It's kind of the illustration of the Beis HaMikdash. This is, and right now, by the way, lot 20, I'm not going to say price of everything. This is a bid of $850, which seems a little low. And so this one recently, there was a new copy, a new edition put out a few years ago. And it's, again, the new edition actually they put in the back a complete, take out a map, again, the picture of the Beis HaMikdash in there, which you can check out. And interestingly, I don't think it's that easy to come by the complete, beautiful, pull-out illustration of the Beis HaMikdash. They actually thank Doug Brook, who is a descendant of Moshe Chayfetz, Moshe Gentili. He's been working on, on and off. I think he has on Facebook. He's been translating Meleches Machsheves. So that's the other work, the more well-known work of Moshe Chayfetz, who lives in Venice, and he dies in 1711 at 48 years old. And Moshe Chayfetz Gentili, in Italian, he is famous because his Meleches Machsheves is, I think, it might be the first sefer printed with the picture of the Mechaber in general, or the picture during his lifetime, and he has long hair, clean shaven, he's wearing almost looks like a galach with a high collar, and he has no yarmulke on his head, and it says he's ben Meya Shana, Anochi Hayayim, and the Meya, though, has the two, apostrophes, shtrechel, quotation marks on top of it, which means he's 46 years old. However, in the second edition, that was published the second edition was published with the picture in the 19th century with a commentary, and in that one, they printed the picture, they changed his features a little, but they left the long hair and the clean shaven, but they included a yarmulke. But in the back of that one, they do include, all the way in the back of the book, they say an apology, they say, we know it says he's 100 years old, he doesn't look 100 years old, but that's the picture, it's not our fault. Then there was another edition done. It was a photo offset of the 19th century edition, and in that one, I think it was by Shaul Sheffer, and in that one, he removes, the only thing that's removed, I don't think he has the picture from America, but he removes that little thing in the back also, because he took out that part. So, maybe I'm getting it wrong if he has the picture or not, but that's the interesting part of Moshe Chayfetz in general. It's a very interesting commentary. But this is his book, Chanukah Sabayis, about the Beis HaMikdash, again, Beis HaMikdash Hasheni, and in the new edition that came out recently, they do talk about that I think Rabbi Yosef Myers, and he does talk about how it seemingly is based on the Sefer of the Taisis Yom Tov, on the third Beis HaMikdash, even though this is on the second Beis HaMikdash. So that is lot 20. Now we'll jump ahead to lot 22, which lot 22 is a Sefer Enei HaEda, which the two volumes are bound together, and it's by the Shevet Moshe Eliyahu Kohen Tamari. This is Izmir 1863, 1864. The catalog here says it's not seen in public auctions. And so there is another item later on in this catalog with a manuscript of Eliyahu Kohen Tamari. So Ramesh, I'll turn it over to you to talk about.
Yeah, that's item number 169. The manuscript, which you can log on to the site and check out these beautiful scans and photos. The manuscript that they show you on lot 169, which there's no description there, and they're not sure if it's been published, but you can click on the image and enlarge it, and you'll see that it says on the top, it's the Megalit Sefunos on Bereshis. That's another work of Rebbe Eliyahu HaKohen. I think there's 3 volumes, Bereshis, Shemos, and Vayikra. The copy that they have is the autograph of the Shevet Moshe himself, and you can see there's corrections he made in the margin. He added additions. I checked those against the printed edition, and they are in the print edition. Likely, the print edition is made from this manuscript, but the manuscripts of Rebbe Eliyahu HaKohen are rare, very likely because of the Great Fire in Izmir that we had an occasion to discuss recently, which devastated a lot of the city's treasures, including Rabbi Chaim Palachi talks about specifically manuscripts of the Shevet Moshe that were lost. Luckily, the Sefer had been printed, so this survived, and we do have so in lot 169 you have an actual manuscript of the Megal Tunis, and in lot 22 you have the print edition of the Ein Ha'eda. Both are rarities from this big gadol. He lived in the 1600s. He was contemporaneous with the episodes of Shabbos Tzvi. When it became clear that Shabbos Tzvi was no longer the one we await, he did vocally oppose him, and that has been published. Although, however, they also found writings of his which may date to an earlier time, where he was very hopeful that this might turn out good for the Jewish people. So it's been pointed out that he has Sabbatian leanings, although he's also an opponent of Sabbatianism. You have to take all that information against the backdrop of the Ottoman Sephardim in general, who were not so they didn't go crazy in their opposition. Even after the apostasy of Shabbatai Tzvi, they weren't going to go root it out now from the roots. They were just going to live with it. Chaim Palachi says, he quotes the pasuk, we're not going to curse him, we're not going to bless him. Gam barach lo tivarchenu, gam takav lo tikavenu, like it says by Balak. So that's the background for the Shevet Moshe and his farm over here.
Lot 27 is Mikne Avram, the Hebrew Latin edition, Venice, 1523, printed by Daniel Bomberg. This is Avram, I believe it's pronounced D-Bombs, but it's when I was offered there's a new book that came out about Mikne Avram from Dr. Dror Ben Aryeh. When I originally was offered, someone was offered it as Mikne Avram of Avram Di Bulmash. That is not his name. It should be D-Bombs, I believe. So he was born in Napoli. So he's from South Italy. He's from a Catalonian family. He's born in the mid-15th century, 1440 around. He ends up, his family, his grandfather had been there. He had been the doctor for King Ferdinando of Napoli. And he's admitted to university. Then the grandson of Avram Dibalmas, this one, eventually is admitted to university. He learns by Rabbi Yehuda Messer Leon, the Neifas Sufim. This is a famous bar plukta to some extent of the Marik. I think he's been mentioned on the podcast. Anyways, Avram Dibalmas goes north. So this is a book of grammar. I think in the new study it's called like theoretical grammar. It's actually a pretty massive book. I believe what he says here is that it has 86,000 milim bivris, he says, without taisa. So it's a pretty massive book. And there was two editions done. There was the Hebrew and a Hebrew Latin. So Rabbi Avram himself, he passed away in 1523, and the book was published shortly thereafter. And so this work of his, now they write here in the description that it's pretty much identical, I guess to some extent, but it is different. There are differences between the Latin and between the Hebrew, because the Hebrew Latin one, this is in the Renaissance period, is humanist. So the Hebrew Latin would generally be geared towards a Christian audience, whereas a Hebrew one would be geared to a Jewish audience. So there are differences, as Dr. Ben Aryeh points out, that in the regular, now there's two introductions. There's an introduction of the Bombs himself, and there's an introduction from Daniel Bomberg, who non-Jewish. And so Bomberg in the Baum's right, when he writes in the Hebrew one, it says that, talks about Baumberg, he says, Shuhu ish noitzri v'es Elohav hu yarei. He is a Christian and he worships, he fears his God. But in the Hebrew Latin one together, he says, Kim hu yarei. Or it would be Shem Chayil, I'm not sure. So then another difference can be pointed out is he takes away title, descriptions, where he would write, in the Hebrew one, he says, Kafi Mashakasav Harav Rav Moshe Kimchi. But in the Hebrew Latin, he says, Kafi Mashakasav Rebbe Moshe Kimchi. Or another difference is, Hepech Pirushe Rabbi Seinu Aleiham HaSholom. And in the Hebrew Latin, Hepech Pirushe Rabbi Seinu. And there's letter differences, so there are differences between the two editions to note. Now, also, there's also two, like we said, there's two different introductions. And, he says, Dr. Ben Ari says, it's pretty clear that they were being written for different audiences, that the Hebrew one was intended for a Jewish audience and the Hebrew Latin was intended for a Christian audience.
Which is interesting. This is the time of, this is the Renaissance where the Christian Hebraists are very much endeavoring to read and write Hebrew as well, not just getting the information from these Hebrew books, but they even want to have access to the original Hebrew.
Yeah, and it's a lined edition. It has the lines. It tells you line numbers, and it's the translation. There's Hebrew on one side, the translation on the other side. Now, also interestingly, as you may have noted, it's Mikne Avram, not Mikne Avraham. So without the hey. So why does it have without the hey? Obviously, took the word from the Torah. So just first of all about the Mikna, it says again reading from Dr. Aryeh's study, points out that Mikna has two. It means two things. It means the Pashup Pshat, Mikna, this Tainu Bakar that Avram had. They were worshiping. Also, as Mikna, it says Lashon Kinyan. It says Rechush. You buy something, you have something. So Rechush of Avram, something. What is the Rechush of Avram? What does Avram Avinu have that goes from generation to generation? Hebrew. Safar Ivris, the Hebrew language. So every dar has to be Zimchuyev Lishmar Lev L'Tapech. So you have to go and you have to be busy with it. And he says he actually brings the Latin over here. So it says what the Latin title is. He said the Latin. He says, probably going to butcher the Latin pronunciation, but Pecululium, well, that's peculium, is means Kinyan, and that also comes from Pecus, Pecus, which just means tzayin, same type of thing. Now, again, why it says Avram, because Avram, right, Avram Avinu, changed it, the Hay changed his name to Avram. So he says, Avram the Bombs explains in his Hakdam, in his introduction, that he changed the name to Avram. I don't know if he changed his own name to Avram, I'm not sure, but definitely changed the name of the Sefer because his son died. And so it was like the opposite of Avram Avinu. So he's saying, and he writes that if he has another son, he'll change his name back to Avraham, or definitely the name of the Sefer, which is very interesting. So the Sefer is called Mikne Avram, which is interesting. And so that is the Sefer. It was published a number of times also with Latin, but this is the first edition. This is the Hebrew and Latin edition. And so that is Lot 27. Now, just Lot 29 is Ben Melech Vanozir, just to mention that's a fable. It's a very interesting kind of...
At some point in time, it had been attributed to Avram but Rambam. I get asked about it a lot of times if I'm going to be doing an edition of that, and no, I don't have any such plans.
Moving into Lot 34, which is the Mavri Yaboik. Mavri Yaboik is a really important classic sefer of Reb Aaron Bracha of Modena. And Aaron Brachia, to read you, I'll start off with the Chida's description of him. This is a very important sefer for Chevra Kadisha, for burial, for Avelos, extremely important, based on Kabbalah. He was a big Mekubal. He lived in Modena in the 17th century. He's a Talmud of Ramam Mifano, Menachem Azariah Fano, and a number of others. But what the description that the Chida gives for him in Shem HaGdolim, the Chida says that Vishamati Shahile Magid, Vishamati Inyanim Rabim Azuzay V'Nifla of Zia. So he explains to him, he talks about him in glowing terms. Mavri Yaboik, again, this massive work, which was actually one of the Svarim, was redone, a new edition by Avat Shalom many years ago, and then it was redone again. One of the few Svarim that they've really redone again. But what's interesting about the Sefer is, again, it talks about Chevra Kadisha and death. Rabbi Yaakov Hillel in his introduction does talk about that it's extremely important for just daily living, because it talks about, if you read the Sefer, you'll see it's important for everything. It's not only important for the dead and dying, but that's really what the Sefer obviously is focused on. Bar Bracha came from a family that he's related to Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh of Modena, who is famous, has been discussed a number of times on this podcast, the Rabbi of Venice, who famous has his autobiography, Life of Yehuda, Chai Yehuda, as well as other Sfarim, like Arinayim, against the Zohar. But they were cousins. They were related. They were cousins. I believe their grandfathers were brothers or something like that. So he talks about him. Rabbi Yehuda Madana talks about this. He talks about them, and he does say that he explains, Rabbi Yehuda in his autobiography, says that the family came originally from France, and he says that they know in the house there was an Elon, there was a genealogical tree explaining the family, and he says that Umiyadoidi Moren Rab Shlomo Zal Mimodon Hagil Yad Ben Bitoy Kroivi Moreno Rav Rabbeinu Aaron Bracha Becher Moshe Modon Yitzav. So he does say that it went to him, that he had to his cousin. And he says he left his hand. I tried to find it. I couldn't find it. And he talks about the family. The family was a very important family in Modena. They were from the first, as he explains, they were from the first bankers. Jew at this time. There was city-states in Italy and Jews, North Italy, Modena, which is North Italy. The North Italy, the Jews were oftentimes bankers, they would loan money with their banks. And so this was a family that had a lot of money. But interestingly, Rabbi Aaron Brachia, we don't really understand why he was raised by his grandmother. It's not clear what happened between him and his parents. He does mention them. He gives like a hesped, he does talk about them. But on the other hand, as Avashalom points out, he does talk about in one of his Sfarim, he starts talking about my parents, they abandoned me. A very interesting lesson is that we don't really understand why. But regardless, his grandmother, Fioretta, who is called Bathsheba, he says, Fioretta de Miscaria Bathsheba. And she raised him. And she was a fascinating woman, evidently, because when he talks about her, this is in his Sefer Ashmeres HaBoker. So Ashmeres HaBoker is another very important Sefer he wrote. It would be, they would get up early, and for the tefillas he put together, and he writes there about his grandmother who raised him. He says, Shekama pio is posabi mechayeha l'schusi ul'hachayusi, for my schus and for the hachayusi for me, v'gam shekol yomel, from her all her days, like poska puma, her mouth did not stop, make girsa from learning, b'mikra from chumash, u'b'mishnah mishnayis, u'b'sifra ha'paiskim, and from halacha, u'b'roish kulam harambam, mainly the Rambam. V'gam siach hoyla b'sifra hazoyer kafi hasagasa. She also used to learn Zoyer as much to her understanding. U'mehakolim, from all this asas Allah sedarim midei shivua b'shvua. They used to learn together, I guess. B'roish kol ma'aseh v'tzidkeseh tamim ha'seh yoda psucha b'ritzoi. She would always give money ready to hire me tutors and people to learn with me. She used to come with him. I used to be on her table. At the end of her days, she became 75 years old. And interestingly, in Chai Yehuda of Rabbi Yehuda he says that she got to the Gvul, to the boundary of Eretz Yisrael, and there she died, and she's buried there. But Rabbi Yehuda says she came to Tzfas. He says, "V'nisharti ani levadi poi b'mei yaldus nar ubar nar neor v'reik mikol chachmo mada ki lezechisi l'shamash tamidei chachamim rak ma'at mizer le'kabir v'afilu shuster mon le'gamirna." And he continues on. So, really a fascinating woman, and there actually is a podcast I recorded about the Jews of Modena where I mentioned this passage and I talked about him a little bit. I haven't posted that yet, but I do have that podcast. So as I mentioned, he learned by Hillel of Modena, he learned by Menachem Azaria, which is the Ramah Mifano, and Rabbi Sol Sorok, the famous Talmud Arizal, the famous disseminator of the Torah of the Ari, who was in Italy. So that's where he really got a lot of the Torah of the Arizal. And interestingly, one more thing to mention about Rabbi Aaron Brachia, one more thing about the grandmother that he mentions. Again, as I said, the grandmother Fioretta is the one that raised him. So that Hakdama that I read, that part, that really fascinating passage, it's quoted in the Avat Shalom Mavri Yabik in the new edition, as well as in the Avat Shalom Drushes that they published his sermons from manuscript, although I don't think that's around anymore. There also is, in Mavri Yabik itself, he does talk about his grandmother, and I think that's worth mentioning as well. He says, when he talks about his grandfather, he says, "Aim imi hazikna chashuva v'achachma moras fioreta de miskaria basheva al monas hagoyin k'marav reinu b'shloimi Yaakov Rafal ben hagoyin v'reifi mufla b'derik mar Mordechai v'modanes atzal mikadmuni mishpachas gerish tzarfas asher hazikna haniskeres and then a lo'olam atares l'roishi ki her v'loy achrim no one else miyoyim tzeisi mirechem imi gadleni keben she raised me like a son v'chayev ani lo and I'm chayev to her moira v'kavod ka'av ha'im v'gam rav." And also a Rebbe. She taught me Chachma. Saying she's his Rebbe. Hagam delav chakima novel lechizav legamana vajrina lemagash urchasa de imano. But he's saying that he learned from her as well, which is really fascinating. It gives you kind of an insight into him and his mother. Again, this is a classic sefer that's quoted, by everybody. I think Rabbi Yaakov Hillel talks about it again in his introduction here. This is a very, very, very important sefer until today. Throughout the centuries, this was printed a second time in Amsterdam. But this lot here, Lot 34, is the first edition. And one other thing to mention about it is that it's signed by a number of the Foa family, including Rabbi Eliezer Nachman Foa, who is the Goren Arnon, is how he signs his name. And the Goren Arnon, he's also a student of Rami Fano, which I don't think they mention here. A number of his Sfarim have been redone. Mainly, his only sefer that he published was Medrash B'Chiddush, which is an amazing Haggadah. By the way, talking about Haggadah Shal Pesach, highly recommend. It's really fabulous, and a beautiful edition was done by Ravi Gutman Reich. They included the Kimcha Avishuna, the Nusach B'Reima. They included notes, and they included the Haggadah. It's really beautiful Haggadah. It should still be available. It was in a second edition, and Eliezer Nachman Foa, he was at this time, and so this is signed by him. That this is signed by him. It's his copy of the Maver Yaboik, and that is Lot 34.
Yeah, moving right along is Lot 41. Lot 41 is the Machberes of Emmanuel Haroimi, the Machberes Emmanuel of somewhat ill fame, perhaps. It's singled out in the Shulchan Aruch for a sefer you shouldn't read on Shabbos, and also don't read it during the week. He says because the kind of poetry that was acceptable in the year 1300 was no longer acceptable in the tzfas of the 1500s, and for good reason. It's what they would call divrei cheshek, divrei romance, divrei agavim, but there's also it's the poetry was widely read because it also has moral and ethical themes as well in there. And that's as far as the Machberes is concerned. But there's also Emmanuel is more than just a poet. He was also an important Mefarish HaMikra, as evidenced by a quote in the Shem HaGdolim.
Yeah, which is this something that I said over. So if you want to hear more about Emmanuel, there's a long podcast I did on Emmanuel Rome with Professor Donna Fishkin, who just put out a study on him, on part of the Machberes. If you want to hear more about the Machberes, obviously in Shulchan Aruch, it says, you don't have to read it. But what the Chida does say, which is what I pointed on that podcast, very important to note about Emmanuel himself. The Chida at the end, it's in Shem HaGdolim, Mareches Beis at the end. It's Kuntras Achron, and it says, Bir upirish Eiv Mishlei Tehillim. So a commentary on Eiv, Mishlei Tehillim. Shamati Sha'amru Balei HaProshim, which they don't know who it is. Shebi Eiv, an Eiv Yikari Ha'adam Pirish Ralbag. V'yir Vatzamoinai. On Eiv, you should learn Ralbag, your sanities. Ube Mishlei Yikari Pirish Emmanuel. You should learn Emmanuel on Mishlei. That's the commentary of choice. Ube Tehillim Yikari Pirish Rabbi David Kim, Cheshon Radak. And he says, Vanachnu Simon Asfas Emes Tikin Lo'ad. MS Rosh Tevis, it's MS Rosh Tevis Eiv Mishlei Tehillim. Load is Rosh Tevis Levi Emmanuel David V'him Kisijon. That's exactly how you should do it. And then he quotes the Seder Doris talking about Emmanuel, and he brings down Shulchan Aruch, and he talks about Machzik Baruch, what he says, etc. So there is that obviously there, and I talked more about this in that podcast. You can check out over there. But just to mention, as Ramesh is saying about Emmanuel the person and Emmanuel the commentator, the Chida is saying that's who you should learn. So which is what interesting. But that's not about Machberes Emmanuel. So this lot 41, is Machberes Emmanuel, Constantinople, Kushta, 1535, the second edition. So lot 44, just interestingly, this just came up, is the Eidus B'Yosef, section 1 only. This is Rabbi Yosef Al-Masnino. So just recently, a couple of days ago, Shirley Bornstein did a raid bite on Rabbi Yosef Al-Masnino, talking about one of his pshatim, and a back and forth with him and the Shas Tshuva Shar Ephraim. Really fascinating. You should check that out if you want to hear more about Rabbi Yosef Al-Masnino. Rabbi Yosef Al-Masnino, interestingly, was Sabbatian. Again, the same thing we mentioned about Rabbi Yochanan. He was Sabbatian before. Was he still a Sabbatian after? Maybe. There's kind of questions about this. And, as Rabbi mentioned there, and this is kind of something that came up when I did the Shabtai series, we never know who was before, who was after, who stopped. Obviously, the Knesset Gdola was famously definitely a Sabbatian at the height of the movement, one of the big supporters, but then, not after, recanted after. So, that's interesting, but this is Rabbi Yosef Al-Masnino, a very important halacha sefer. This is Chuvas Eidus B'Yosef, volume 1. Moving along to Lot 49, which is, Lot 49 is an interesting sefer that they say, it's extremely rare, and saying over here that to the best of Taj Art's knowledge, this was only printed once. So this sefer is a sefer by someone, Rabbi Yaakov Koppel Margolius. And I believe he probably came up on the podcast once a long time ago when I had Professor Adam Teller, when the podcast, I think was that point, was still done Twitter Live, Periscope. And this is because Professor Teller has a wonderful, amazing book that one of the most readable, most, enjoyable in the sense of historical sense, obviously a sad book that I've read, which is called Rescue the Surviving Souls, the Great Jewish Refugee Crisis of the 17th Century. And this is post-Tach V'Tat, we know maybe of Tach V'Tat, but what happened after Tach V'Tat was also horrific, where many Jews were sold into slavery, they went to the Ottoman Empire and had to be redeemed, and this was a kind of a major issue. So Rabbi Yaakov Koppel Margolius was one of the Jews from Ukraine, from where the Tach V'Tat program happened, and he ended up in Venice. He was looking for money, and he was looking to print Sfarim to bring in the funds, and he printed 3 Sfarim, Kol Yaakov, Mizbeach Yaakov, Maris Yaakov, so Kol Yaakov being the first, Mizbeach the second. They were actually redone. I never knew about this till recently. I was able to get a hold of this in a small, little, mini volume by Machon Shuvi Nafshi. But to own the originals would be amazing. I actually have the original Kol Yaakov. Mizbeach Yaakov would be amazing as well, because again, this was somebody that was running away, or he escaped, but his wife and his child or children were in captivity, and he needed to rescue them. He didn't have them. And so, as he relays in his first book, in Kol Yaakov, and he says in there, and in the back, by the way, there's Kinnis about Tach V'Tat, and he explains in the first one already, he talks about the terrible disasters that befell Gzera Hara, Ba'alein al Eretz Polania, on Poland, that time it was Polish Commonwealth, Asher Kablanu Din Shamayim Aleinu, Asher Lacherev, those that should be for sword to the sword, Vasher Larav, Vasher Lashvi. And he continues on, everything was terrible. Everyone was captured. They captured him and his son and his daughter. Obviously, this is all Melitza poetry, according to Psukim and Chazal, and he's saying they dragged us away. Ki girashti me'estabach benachas kedoshim amarti elchali el agdoilim asher koyach lahem lochitzi mimiskar asir. He was trying to go get them out, save me. This is again something Professor Teller talks about extensively of what was going on at the time. V'akel shaboras ha'olam bitzdaka hu yoitzi esim in a shivya. So Yaakov Koppel's talking about himself. He got out. Ki hu siba lechala sibas v'nosan oisi lerachem lefane anshes segula hema anshe shem toiva sheba eretz hema. The good people in those land nedivim. Tzadikim, Chasidim, Benonshal, Kedoshim, Rachmanim, Bnei Rachmanim, merciful people, but he says, Kal Kodesh Kushtantina of Constantinople, Ubefrat, HaChachamim, HaShleimim, Asher Beim Oiskim, B'Toira, Leilis, V'Yomim, V'Oisim Chesed, Bnei Yisrael, and Asunim, Biyad, Adoinim, Kashim, those that rescue. This is appropriate right now when we have captives. He's talking about those that rescue, and those that are making sure to rescue Jews that are in captivity. Upadu I see, and they redeemed me. Yishalev Olam, Yishalem B'Chelam, Chayim Ad Ha'olam. He says, Umanet Daber, Umanet Tzadok, Ki Hamar Shakei Li, Ki Nisharu Li B'ni B'Shivya. My family is still captured. U'Beroiv Megina V'Anina Ani Hoylech Medina Likwitz Al Yad Ima'at V'Harbe. I'm going to collect money to Loyim Hanidochem V'Avudim B'Yad Zorim Achzorim U'B'Choyoim Elai Mitzapim. And everyone's looking to me. U'Benkach Eyanti Drush Echad Al Kam Agadis. And then he talks about he went and he tried to put together a book and he tried to sell it. And it's extremely sad. It's heartbreaking reading this about Rabbi Yaakov Koppel Margolius. And Professor Teller does translate a number of this, and you can read in his book where he talks about Rabbi Yaakov Koppel Margolius. So the book here that's at auction is on Lot 49 is Mizbeach Yaakov, which is his second book that he publishes later. And he's still this is in 1662, and he's still busy with this. And he says, Aniyat Talmud, Offer shel ragli talmidei chachamim hanishar mibnei hagoyla v'ani nisharti levadi. I'm left myself mi beisi Umibiti umibni umikol nichsi loy nachti v'lo shakadati v'lo shalvasi. I haven't rested. Etein shevach lakel. I give thanks to Hashem. Shehitzel oisi mikaf kol oivei. Save me from all my enemies. Amarti belibi. I said in my heart, Ki ma yesh tachlis shel adam elam hazeh. What's the purpose of a person in this world? Umasha amal amalosi v'yagati ki amoyes him tois. Money is a mistake. Ki ayoim boys ulamachar him nois. Moshe Amar Chazal, Lama Nikush Moy Zuzim. Why is it called a Zuz? Zozim Yad Yad. They get changed from hand to hand. Money. This is a person that really knew he was going through a terrible shreklicha situation. Amarti belibi veruchi oyrasi litvus mizbeach Yaakov. I was inspired to print this book. Nichsavti leilech Eretz Yisrael. I wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. Miyoshvei Abai Beis Hamedrash Lias Chelki, to go sit and learn. Avo ma omar ma adaber ma etstado kehemar shakeli. I've had a bitter time. Ki b'ni ubiti rebesi v'kroivai nisheru b'shivi. They're all left. They're captured. They're in captivity. They're still in captivity. In 1662. Remember, talking about that is 48-49. Ubiroiv magina vinyana muchrachani leilech memedina lemedina likbitz yadi. I must go collecting. Imaat v'mharbe, a little bit a lot. Tiloim hanidochem oivdim biyad zorim achzorim. Vicious, terrible people. Every day I'm waiting. Everybody knows Churban shel Polani. Everyone knows the destruction of Poland. Ashel lacherev lacherev, vashel larav larav, vashel lamaves lamaves, vashel lashvi lashvi. Ki b'shavai kulu isnu be. Everyone was captured. Lochein anshe segula b'ni kel chai hamorgelim b'mitzvah rabba pidyon shvuyim. Those that are known in Pidyon Shvuyim, K'moisha also Anshe Segula, Anshe Shem Tov Nedivim Chasidim Benon Shel Kedoshim Rachmanim Bnei Rachmanim Hakal HaKodesh Kushtandina. Again, he's talking about the Constantinople, the merciful people, and this is what Professor Teller discusses extensively in Constantinople. They really had this awesome responsibility to redeem these Jews that were captured by the Tatars and brought there, and what happened, the terrible situation. Ubifrat hachachamim hashleimim hashehim oimskim b'Torah b'leilis v'yamim v'oisim chesed b'nei Yisrael hanusuna b'yad adoinim kashim v'podu. I see they redeemed me. Yishalev ha'olam yishalem mechilim chayim ad ha'olam. L'chein, he says, hands off. Atem b'nei kel chay chushuna pischu yedechem kodesh. Open your hands, to finish off this great mitzvah. And you should be Zoichet Olam Haba. Be'ezras alekol rabba, ve'kel shakai, and Hashem yitin lechem bracha ad beli dai. He should give you bracha. Kamoisha Amar Navi, the Navi says, Malachi, varikoyse lechem bracha ad beli dai. Amruzal, ad sheyivlu sisasechem yomer dai. And that's how he ends off, and he starts his sefer, and he goes through. It's a small, thin volume, a couple of pages, but really, I thought to read it here to explain the awesomeness of what he's saying and what he's going through. And you read what he's going through and what he's writing, and he's trying to collect funds, and he's publishing these farms. And again, this is unfortunately with Yidden still in captivity right now, at this time that we're recording this, and this Pidyon Shvuyim, this kind of situation that comes up to read. So this is Lot 49, Venice 1662, Mizbeach Yaakov.
Next up is the Sefer Yuchsin. This is, I'm going to call this the Ashkenazic recension of the Sefer Yuchsin. The first edition of Sefer Yuchsin was printed in Kushta. This is the next edition printed in Krakow. This is the one which contains supplement by the Ramah himself, and it's also Ashkenazic in the sense that it doesn't have the they took out some of the honorifics pertaining that they in describing Suleiman the Magnificent, who was the Sultan at the time of the Ottoman Empire, who had recently conquered Yerushalayim and Eretz Yisrael in 1517. So he's referred to in the Yuchsin with laudatory terms. Those are toned down somewhat in this Ashkenazic print, as well as also there's the famous investigation into the origin of the Zohar in the Kushta edition, which was deemed offensive in Krakow and removed, only to be restored from the manuscript much later in the Filipovsky critical edition. But this is the basis for all subsequent editions of the Sefer Yuchsin. Very crucial, a basic sefer into the Jewish history, and he has also the list of Tanoim and Amayroim. He was the first sefer to systematically describe it, time, place, names, Sfarim, authors, up until his time, till about 1500. It's a very important sefer.
Just worth mentioning, nothing really substantively to say, but Lot 59, Lot is the Gvurus Hashem of the Maral, printed in Krakow 1582 by the Maral. Lot 60 is Derech Hashem on Masechta Avos of the Maral, printed in 1589, again by the Maral. Lot 61 is Beragoyl of the Maral, printed in 1598. of the Maral. So these are Sfarim of the Maral that, again, I feel like there's been recently a bunch of these at auction, but still amazing. Sfarim of the Maral printed himself during his lifetime. Pretty amazing.
These are classics, absolute classics of Jewish thought today. The next lot, 62, is the first print of the Chuvas Marshal Shlomo Luria, very important Chuvas Sefer. This edition is the rare. It's a rare edition because the Tfus Rishon itself, they've had to be amended when it came to the attention of the authorities that he names and shames an actual Moiser in Tshuva Yud Aleph. He has the name of the Moiser that had to be taken out in some of the prints, as well as the next Tshuva, which deals with the fallout and the reputations of certain families that were involved in this episode. That's Tshuva Yud Beis. That had to be taken out in the very first print. So this particular edition of the first edition, this particular copy of the first edition, is unique in that it's the full edition. The modern print of the Chuvas Marshal by Zichron Aaron does. You can check that one and see the episode in question. You see the names in question, but a first edition with the full edition is rare. Lot 55 earlier is the second edition of Chuvas Marshal. So together they are make a nice pair for a very important sefer.
Lot 69, which is a pretty cool in the sense that this one, they say, rare and valuable book that has not appeared in public auctions. And as far as I see, it is extremely rare. This is a sefer Kiryas Chana on Masechtas Avos. There's actually a new edition. So as rare as it is, there is a new edition. I don't know how available this is. This was printed. The new edition was done by Reb Shalom Jacob, Zichron Levracha, who published many Sfarim, especially rare Sfarim, that were never really printed. And so this Sefer is printed. It was written by Rabbi Chanan ben Rabbi Tzalel Uri Lipman Chayfetz. So earlier we mentioned Lot 20 Moshe Chayfetz, and in the introduction to the Jacob edition, they do mention that this Rabbi Chanan Chayfetz, even though he says he's from Mikal Kadosh Pozna, he's from Posen, he's in Poland, but it's the Chayfetz family, related to Moshe Chayfetz. They come from North Italy. And what's interesting about this is, if you look at the title page of this Sefer, which you can see on, online, and I'll read it in the new one, it says, Kiryas Chana, Asher izin v'chikar v'tikno lodas mimona kona v'kinomanim kol atze levayin bir al pirkei avos u'medrasha yafim esukim midvash v'nefes sufim halayhu aluf b'toira u'mesubel b'mitzvahs harehu k'marav re're're'er achanan ben aluf ha'gadol marav rabbeinu b'tzal uri lipman chayfetz al mipozna v'hu v'lebeis atfus. It was brought to print b'haskomas. So with Haskama, there's no Haskama in the Sefer, so I don't know what it means, Haskamas. Marina v'Rabno Hagoin Ram de Kal Kodesh Prague, Marav Harav Rabbeinu Shlomo Ephraim Yud Sadi v'Hugal Yadai. So who are we talking about? There's Rabbi Shlomo Ephraim Lonchitz. This is the Abbezin of Prague, the Kliyakar. So the Kliyakar himself brought this to print, and he was the editor of Hugal Yadai. The editor of this book is the Kliyakar. He's the editor of the Sefer. So this is printed in Prague in 1612. And again, it's extremely rare. There's a very interesting title page with a lot of interesting pictures. You can check that out. This title page, and the little they know about him, it seems like evidently a lot of the stuff in the Sefer are similar to Kliyakar. So it would seem like the hashara of Reb Shalom Jacob was that he's a Talmud of the Kliyakar, because we know that the Kliyakar, we talked about the Marshal, learned about the Marshal, and this one also, and the father learned there. So it seems the grandfather, the father. So it seems like that he would have been a Talmud. And he was Nifter, and that he printed. And there's a little bit, we don't know a lot about him. But what is really fascinating is Shalom Jacob, who had a massive, massive collection of Svarim. And I know right now there's actually a website. They're working on it. His son, they're working on rolling out a website. They're working on many different projects. L'Zeichen Ishmas, his father, Shalom Jacob, who published the Sefer, was recently Nifter. So he had a massive collection. But what he says here, and I'll just read you from the new edition. When he says Dvar Machadam Letzach Hadash, he says Lezechisi and Ois Yud Beis. He says Lezechisi Lahasik Oitek Tfus Rishon Shel Kiryas Chana. I could not get a copy of this first edition. And this is, we're talking about a big collector. I did it from many different scans, came from many different places. Befrat, Atzilam, Yoiser Bar, the best one, Shesachisi Lahasik, Bes Ekedas Svarim, Shebesifras Bodleian, from the Bodleian Library in Oxford, Shesham Gonas, Oitega Sefer, Sheshach, Lagoin, David Oppenheim's at Sokol. It was David Oppenheim's. But he says, Af Petzilim Zazel, Pa'amim Nira Oisias Chaseres, Metushtasha, they're not clear. Umiyadeam, Zachisi Lacham, Mitzad Varim, Lachenim, Timsa, Kaira, Davar Kasha, Izar, Yisu B, Viachri Atzmo, Kavanas Rena Machaber. No, I don't have a copy. And again, this is a major bibliophile, so this is a really, indeed, so, they say here that it hasn't appeared before, but taking Rosham Jacob was a major bibliophile. What he wrote, this is really not, and that was just printed in Tafshan Gimel, this was printed a couple of years ago, not a common book. This is lot 69, again, commentary on Perkavos, a really nice copy of an extremely rare sefer.
Next lot on the list here is lot 72. That's the Siva of Reb Sachia of Regensburg, Ratisbon in English or French, and the Reb Sachia is one of the he's a brother of the Rihalovin, the Baal Tosfos, and he travels for his time absolutely unique for someone from a French German Jew to travel throughout the Ottoman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. And he reports what he sees. Some fascinating testimonies. This is the first publication for many European Jews. This is the first. It's all these hundreds of years later, but this is the first information they have about the Karoi communities in Byzantium, and they learn about Bavel. They learn about Reb Shmuel ben Ali, the Rosh Yeshiva of Bavel, the Reish Galusa. They learn about how he was almost like royalty. He had a royal home with servants and his own police force, which would, they would flog people that would disrespect him or disobey him. He had complete authority. He was recognized by the government. He mentioned some very interesting things, which must have been, sound very interesting to the European readers of this first edition. Like, for example, he says that in Bavel, everybody, from even the young children, are fluent in the Mikra with the Diktuk, with the Taimim, and this is true even till today in Sephardic communities where there's a very big emphasis on reading the Torah with the Ta'amim. And he talks about how, unlike in Europe where there's a Baal Kaira, it's interesting to find out when the Baal Kaira minhag started, but in Europe he says there's a Baal Kaira who reads the Torah when you get an Aliyah, but in Bavel, whoever gets an Aliyah gets up and they read the Torah because they all know how to read the Torah. He says they all learn. They learned Reb Sadia Gaon. This is before Reb Sadia Gaon went lost, but they would learn all Reb Sadia. They learned the Mishnah with Reb Sadia and Reb Hai Gaon. Again, these are Perushim which were common in Bavel at the time, but subsequently were lost and only now being reconstructed to the best of our abilities. He talks about all the Kvarim that he saw, the Yechezkel Hanavi or Baruch ben Neriah, full of interesting stories, full of Nisim v'Niflois, which also shows you his background. For example, every gadol, the greatness of the person is because they know all the Shemus HaKadoshim. That's what he adds in. He knows Torah and he knows Tanakh and he knows the Shemus HaKadoshim. So it shows you a little bit about Reb Sachia and his intellectual world. But it's a very, very fascinating sefer.
Yeah, and stay tuned on Reb Sachia. I am somewhat, I don't know if, and I'm still looking for more feedback on this, but working on a series on Jewish travelers throughout the ages and their travelogues and their fascinating, resource, primary resource. So lot 73 is Sefer Ivronot, which should be Evronot by, it says Eliezer Balin Ashkenazi. And this is the Offenbach edition of 1722. So this is a work on astrology. This will tell you how to calculate in the calendar, and the Tkufis, which is the solstice, and the Moldus, and the new moon, etc. So I think I've mentioned this book the last time where we talked about, the last Hajar one, we talked about Rabbi Yisachar ben Susan, but Palaces of Time by Professor Elisheva Kalbach, which is Jewish Calendar and Culture in Early Modern Europe. Really wonderful read, fascinating book. Highly recommend it. And she talks about Balin. On page 55 in the book, it says, we don't know who he is. He appears as the author starting in the 17th century, and it says doesn't even appear on where she calls him the elusive Balin, came to be credited with the Jewish computist to the virtual exclusion of all the enterprising individuals who preceded him. And they said some contemporary bibliographers and cataloguers follow suit, attributing all Sefer Evrona to this quote-unquote author. So she talks about the other ones. She said virtually nothing is known about Balin's life or how he came to be a pivotal figure in printing the Ibr. The text of the one that he printed was in Lublin, 1650, and says it was very similar to manuscript ones circulating in German lands that she checked. But he is considered, we don't know, he's from family of worms, who he is, and she talks a little bit about him and what he does. So there's more to say about him. But that is lot 73, and it has the all the different illustrations and so on, and you can see that in this lot. Moving along with, and by the way, we obviously have skipped over many different lots over here. Like I said, lot 79 is a beautiful copy of Nishmas Chaim of Menashe ben Israel, who I did a podcast a couple of years ago with Professor Stephen Nadler on Menashe. There's definitely should be doing more on Menashe, but this includes, there's the rare leaves. So Menashe printed this, and there's a number of things, as they say here. The final leaf has something by Yaakov Sasportas. Yaakov Sasportas, famously the anti-Shabbos Tzvi. He worked for Menashe in his press. Menashe had a press, so he was one of the Rabbanim in Amsterdam at the time. And he's famous for many different things, but including after this he tried to get the Jews readmitted to England. Stay tuned. There'll be a podcast on when the 10 Lost Tribes series returns after Pesach. There's going to be an episode on Menashe and his hope of Israel, Mikveh Yisrael, talking about the Aseret HaShvatim. And he was a very important author, very important for many things. And they also have it looks like together with it, there were a portrait page. There's a picture, it's said to be Menashe, painted by Rembrandt. Professor Stephen Nadler in his book Rembrandt's Jews, and in his biography of Menashe, talks about this. Is it really Menashe? Is it not Menashe? Etc. But they have that here. Looks like it's in a frame together with the original Nishmas Chaim. And I will tease that we've been thinking about this. This is probably a good place to mention this. Moshe and I about working on a new edition of Nishmas Chaim of Menashe ben Israel in Hebrew. There is an edition out right now just with Nekudas in 2 columns. It's not befitting. It's not what should be done. It's a fascinating book. I don't know if I mentioned what the Sefer is about. I probably should mention the Sefer is about.
I consider it it's about esoterica, like the neshama and the Sambatyan and Yeshiach and a lot of that kind of matter. But it's a very nigla kind of treatment of this esoteric matter. He's famous for his edus about the stone and the sand from the Sambatyan River. He talks about the neshama, and it's just an amazingly interesting book. It's a very inspirational book. The Minchas Elazar Munkach highly recommends reading the Sefer. It's been studied by Gedolim throughout the generations. But sadly today virtually unknown. Probably it needs time for a good edition. So that's what we've been. This project is still in its infancy, and we are looking for interest. We're looking for sponsors. We're looking for people to move it along. But we did lay the groundwork for this project, and hopefully if there's interest and feedback, we can maybe get something going.
Yeah, if anyone is interested, again, we are definitely looking for sponsors and those who would be able to contribute financially. So if someone is interested, please email me, svarimchat@gmail.com. Again, if you're on the WhatsApp chat, you can message me privately, and please reach out if you would be interested in being involved. So this, again, Lot 79, a beautiful copy of Nishmas Chaim. Really, by the way, it's a beautiful font, printed by Menashe at his Amsterdam press. Beautiful. It's just a beautiful copy. So that is Lot 79.
This font is the famous Amsterdam font, which is the father of the Sansino font and other fonts. It's in the world of printing. It is beautiful, and we may even be able to recreate that to some extent if we get to that point.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see about that project, and for those interested, please do reach out. And then there's a number of Haggadahs here with beautiful illustrations. Lot 86, Amsterdam Haggadah, lot 87 Sefer Menhagim. But what's interesting, lot 89 is really interesting because this is a 1695 Amsterdam Haggadah with a map of Eretz Yisrael. It's really nice, but what's interesting, they say this is the first one that has copper engravings, which is pictures, not like woodcuts. And there's a whole lengthy description you can talk about. There's a variant, it has different things, it's a very rare copy. But this one, all the pictures are in color. Now, for those that didn't print color in 1695, someone colored this. And it's beautiful. I mean, the pictures are beautiful with the colors, the map, and everything. It's really quite beautiful, quite striking, and it has a bit of $5,500 because it's really a really nice print, nice file, nice pictures. Check it out. Go look at Lot 89 on the website just to see the pictures and to see the color. When you color them in, it's really beautiful. Those old pictures, they're quite charming. And again, a lot of these old Haggadahs had pictures. Lot 91 is a Venice 1758 Haggadah with pictures. So that's something that it had, and there's a number of other items. And running along, jumping to the next item here that we'll be discussing, which is Lot 106, which is Rabbi Yosef Schwartz the Divrei Yosef Tuas Haaretz in 3 volumes, slipcase even. They even have a slipcase here, which is interesting. There's someone in a slipcase for this.
Most of his writings, they say, it's almost all of his. It's like a set of his collected writings. Rabbi Yosef Schwartz, Yosef Schwartz, he added the hay when he got to Eretz Yisrael, and he lives in the early, born right in 1804, I think, and just a very unique Talmud Chacham and scholar, a Talmud of Avram Binga from Würzburg, also the Rav of the Würzburger Rav, Rabbi Bamberger. He learns in that yeshiva, and at the same time he goes to the university and he learns geography, he learns languages, and he puts that secular education to holy use when he gets there to Israel, and he starts touring the land and mapping it with a scientific bent and scientific knowledge of the languages. He's able to map out the places, identify kvarim, and he puts it all in the Sefer Tvuos Haaretz. He's also a major Talmud Chacham, and some of these collected writings are his Tshuvos and Halacha. Fascinating individual. Tragically, he died, in his prime from a plague that was rampant. But he's just an amazing Talmud Chacham. His Tvuos Haaretz is famous for, among other things, besides for mapping the land of Eretz Yisrael, which was of great interest not only to Jewish people from the halachic perspective of what is the Gvulos Haaretz, what's Chayven Meiser Mitzvah Tvuos Haaretz, but it was also very, very interesting to European scholars. And the Sefer was translated into German, translated even into English in the 1800s. It got a lot of attention. Some of the things he mentions there, just of great historical interest. He got to Eretz Yisrael in the 1830s. When the yeshiva was still predominantly Sephardic. He even mentions in the Tvuos Haaretz that the Arabs who need to eat halal meat, and they need to eat meat that was they will eat from shechita, kosher shechita, but only Sephardic shechita. They believe that only Sephardim are descended from Avram Avinu. The Ashkenazim, they didn't trust to be descendants of Avram Avinu. But Rabbi Yosef Schwartz joined the yeshiva, and he actually he wore the lavush. He wore the Sephardic lavush. He went as a shliach for the community of Yerushalayim to America and other shlichiyos. He was a very important person in the yeshiv, a very great scholar, and these are his collected writings. They should be of great interest to people, and the editions are beautiful. Moving along, we have lot 109. 109 is a major item here. This is the Siddur of Avignon. Avignon is a southern France. And this is the Chidah's copy of the Siddur and he even tells you where he got it. He gets it from a certain Gvir, Shmuel di Vidaridos is the name, which is hard to make out if you're not familiar with the Chidah's handwriting. But luckily, he talks about getting the Sefer, getting presents, or at least meeting the Gvir who gave him this present. He talks about it in Ma'agal Tov in his second journey through southern France. His first journey we covered in a podcast back when we did the Ma'agal Tov. In the 1750s, he made his way to southern France, where he was revered and loved. And when he comes back here in 1777, they still, the populace still loves him and they revere him. Although he had some more troubles now with the establishment, the bureaucracy and the red tape and getting the donation wasn't so easy for him. But the populace loved him, and he describes many great evenings he spent, particularly with this Gvir. And this Siddur is from the Siddur Avignon is a bigger community in southern France, and he gets the Siddur in Cavaillon. Cavaillon is near Avignon, but Cavaillon is a smaller community, which he describes in Ma'agal Tov. About 30 families make up this community, most of them rich, wealthy people who had set up this community. He even describes there the shul. He says this shul in Cavaillon is just like the shul in Avignon, which practiced the rite in the Siddur Avignon. And he says the shul in Cavaillon is unique that it's 2 layers with the Ezras Nashim on bottom. With they can look up and see the Sefer Torah through holes in the upper floor. This shul is still preserved today. It's a historical attraction today. You can go see the shul. You can see the layers I don't know if the windows are still there. I'm not aware of that, but you can see the actual. It's amazing to see. This is the shul described by the Chidah. He was there. He davened there, and this is where he got the Siddur, which he signs here in item 109.
Yeah, really a fascinating item, and I think that's a bit of $19,000 right now, which makes sense. Signed by the Chidah, and like you said, this is really historical, important for those that know about the Chidah, like you just said. Lot 115 is a miniature Siddur in Amsterdam. It's called, it says Nivs Vasayim, but what's interesting is printed on orange paper. I have no idea if this is the case, but the House of Orange is in the Netherlands in Dutch. So I don't know if that's why it was printed in orange paper. I don't see that. This is just a theory looking at the catalog. I have no idea. But it's interesting that it's printed on this orange hued paper. You can take a look and you can see that. Lot 116 is, they say, a personal machs yamaroim, a base of irgas Hashem emunim with his kavanas, and there's tons of comments and additions. It says a bit of $32,000. That's lot 116. So now moving along to the next item that we'll discuss, and we'll mention we're going to jump through a bunch of items. There's a number of Hasidish items, and I think we've done a number of these auction podcasts. Listeners probably see we don't really talk about the Hasidish items. Neither of us, I don't think that's our strong suit to talk about it. So I just want to mention it's not B'davka that we're not talking about. I know that there's a major appetite and market for Hasidish Svarim. They go for expensive prices. There are a lot of them coming up at auction, some beautiful copies. It's just, like we said, it's not a strong suit. We don't really mention it. There's another copy of the Chida, they say, Milan Drabana. That's what they're lot 135. Now, lot 137 did not get a chance to really check it out more, but would seem to be maybe the most amazing sefer in this auction catalog. Is a sefer of the Kiryas Sefer on the Rambam, Venice 1551 of Ramesh Trani, the Mabit, with his own handwriting, with his copy. That's what they say. So take a look at lot 137. There is a bit of $15,000 at this time. There's a number of signature items. Lot 138 is Naftali Svaratzen with the signature of the Korban Nesanel. Lot 139 is the Shev Yaakov, the Rabbunim Gins, the Rabbi Eger's brother. So there is some interesting items, signed by, as often many auction catalogs do have. Then there is lot 147 is a Machan Ephraim with signed by, there's a Steichemed. They say there's glosses by the Steichemed. I go to the Steichemed. Lot 149 is, for those interested, there's a Chidush of Chaim Alevi, Chaim Brisker, first edition. Comes up from time to time, but for those interested in that. Lot 150 and 151, there's a Latin Travels of Binyamin of Tudela. We talked about before Reb Sacha of Regensburg. Binyamin of Tudela is also a Rishon that goes traveling around. Obviously, he's the more famous one, actually, for those that are familiar with his travels. Lot 154 is extremely, extremely rare. This is they call it the first Torah periodic on history. I don't know if it's the first exactly, but it's this is the Pri Eitz Chaim, but not the Kabbalah one. It's the Pri Eitz Chaim of Amsterdam. There was so famously Yeshivas Eitz Chaim in Amsterdam, and the Pri Eitz Chaim is the journal that they would publish for 80 years.
This is the fruit of Yeshiva Eitz Chaim.
Yeah, this was published for 80 years. This journal was published for. So a very important journal. This is volume 7. And as they say, it's extremely rare. It is definitely extremely rare. And so I will tease that there is an podcast that will be forthcoming. I'll be doing a podcast. Right now there's an ongoing project to digitize all the Pri Eitz Chaim 80 years. It's chuvas. They would write. It was interesting. It wasn't the way they would have like a shayla and they'd write chuvas, and there'd be many chacham and the rabbanim that would write in here, mainly from the yeshiva, like Ramesh says, Pri Eitz Chaim. And so there is a project now to digitize it. They're actually using this program Dicta. It's like sort of an AI technology with, I don't want to, not say what it is in exact, but it's something like that. They're using, I know OCR, they're using definitely very interesting technology, and they're going to be, it's a massive project. They're going to be digitizing it. They're making an index. They're making it available. It's a very important, very chashuv. And so I do plan on doing a podcast on this. You can stay tuned. So, but lot 154 is again, volume 7 of this. It says volume 7, part 3 is what they say, but this is, again, it is a very rare item.
The next item here in my list is 156. 156 is a book list of Reb David Oppenheim's library. Reb David Oppenheim was at the same time a Gadol Ador, at least one of them, maybe the Gadol Ador in Europe. Also a tremendous bibliophile. People listening to the podcast all have that in common with Reb David Oppenheim. They love books. His library, luckily, has been preserved. We learn a lot about Reb David Oppenheim through his library. There's an excellent book on it called Prince of the Press by Teplitsky, who discusses Reb David Oppenheim and his book buying habits and his interests and cultivating his library. And this is a very unique item because this is a book list, a catalog of his Sfarim. The website here says it's a rare item, so it behooves those who love Sfarim to go take a look at 156.
Yes, there's a bunch of manuscripts. We already mentioned the manuscript of Abdul Khani Tamri that's over here. There's a number of other manuscripts. that I won't mention, but you should, again, go check out. I will mention Lot 180 is a manuscript of Menachem Mendel Shklov, Talmud Gaon Vilna, so you can check out that one. Then there's a number of letters, including Lot 182 is Chidusha Torah B'Ephraim Zal Margolius, base Ephraim. You can check that one out. Lot 183 is interesting. It's as they call it, most unique historical document signature of Rabbi Teitelbaum. And as they write, staunch zealot opposing the Zionist state of Israel. But the interesting part is the document was issued by the state of Israel. This is a state of Israel issued document. It has a power of attorney, and there's no notarization on the second side. And Satmar gave his power of attorney on the other side, and so it's signed by him. So it's pretty interesting. You can check it out on the website. You'll see where it has the stamp of the state of Israel, the old one, and you'll see it's signed by the Satmar. So you can see that one. Then moving along to the next item, which is, I'll mention Lot 186 is an autograph of the Shalom Yerushalayim on Yerushalmi on Seder Zerayim. Menachem Tribich. Menachem Tribich is the Rav in Nikolsburg, Bezin in Nikolsburg in the 19th century. So worth mentioning him. Lot 189 actually is we recently talking about Rabbi Zalman Henna, and so this is a manuscript. It's called Mishpat Lashon Kodesh, and Dr. Yoni Wormser, I think we mentioned his terrific book on Zalman Henna. There's a number of these manuscripts floating around. This was never printed, but it seems like it is an earlier edition of one of his other works, but it was never printed. This is one manuscript written by one of his students. So it's not his own manuscript, it's not his own handwriting, but it's something that was not printed.
Lot 192, terrific item here. This is it's very evocative. It's tragic, but it's amazing that we have it. It's from the Dvar Avram. The Dvar Avram, who died in the Kovno ghetto. He was Rabbi Ephraim Ushri and others who were close to him talk about the different svarim he was working on and hoping to smuggle out of the ghetto and get published. Some of them he did. He did manage to send a few manuscripts to his son, an attorney in New York, Leon. Leon published the Drushas of the Dvar Avram, as well as Chelik Gimel of Chuvas Dvar Avram. And one terrible loss is he had a memoir. He was writing his memoir in Zechronis about the Gedolim and Volozhin Yeshiva, and the Rabbi Ephraim Moshe mentions he had seen him working on it. That's a terrible tragedy that of course, pales to the greater tragedy of the loss of human life, but the loss of intellectual property is also a big loss, and that would have probably been a sensational item. But Baruch Hashem, this one other item that did get out is described here in Lot 192, and that's corrections to the first edition, the first Chelik of Dvar Avram. He did manage to smuggle it out, apparently, and it's his in his own handwriting. Places where you should add, subtract, correct, and it adds new chidushim, including chidushim from Reb Chaim Brisker that he quotes that have not been published before. So that's a few of these were published, and there's a write-up about this in Yeshua in volume 25. That's where I learned about this first, but the rest of it has not been published, and here it is offered for auctions, about 25 pages or so of corrections by the Dvar Avram. Very important.
Lot 198 is interesting. It's almost cute. It's a letter from Rabbi Yashiv to Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, and it's actually his askama that he gave for a sefer Tamim Tia, and it's printed in the Tamim Tia, the edition which has been printed in English also as Faith and Folly, and it's Rabbi Yaakov Hillel talking about those who go to people at Hibijibi, I guess, not real Mekubalim, I guess that's the best way to say it, and those assorted type of matters that superstitious type of things, and I can read the skamas in the printed in Tamim Tia, and you can see it here online. And it says Chav Zayin Tishrei Tavshim Memches L'Chavad Rav Agonim Afursim Achacham Hashalim Rav Rabbeinu Yaakov Moshe Hillel Shlita Rosh Yeshiva Zavat Shalom Bracha V'Shalom Rav Hareini Ma'asher Bezeh Kabbalas Akuntres Tamim Tia Shechiber Ma'alek Kvot Terasei Nun Yud Levar Choymer V'Goydel HaIsr Lidrish Memagidei Asides knows to tell you the future HaMeschazim Kepoyle Yeshuas, and they act like those that bring faith, Yeshuas Yiratzin Shechavetz Hashem B'Yodei Yatzliach V'Akuntres Yeh L'Te'eles L'Himona Melachachshal Melachshal B'Orchas HaKalkulos. Those that go in the crooked path. He says, he signs his Didcha, Yosef Shalom Yashiv. And so this is the Haskama. It's here. You can, lot 198. And the last lot, 200, I thought it was cute. They're selling a manuscript of Badei HaShulchan from Feivel Cohen, who was nifter recently, the Badei HaShulchan. and they're selling this draft copy of the Badei Shulchan. I guess recent Gedalim even, was major poskim. They published a draft. I do want to jump back. I did forget to mention Lot 92. Lot 92 is Haggadah Pesach with Leil Shimurim. Leil Shimurim is Michael Epstein, Michael Halevi Epstein, the Aruch HaShulchan, and this was printed in 1928 by his daughter. And this is his commentary on the Haggadah. He wrote a commentary. I am kind of a stickler for real commentaries. This is a real commentary. It's not a likud. There's actually been a new edition printed with a picture of him on the cover. I think I said it once on the podcast. I've definitely told people this, that most Sfarim with a picture on the cover stay far away from. You don't want to touch. But, except for the Chida and Ben Ish Chai. But this one actually, even though the new edition has his picture, yeah. But this copy here is the original, 1928, and it's the copy of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach with Shlomo Zalman's signature. So, very nice item, and that has a bid right now for $600, and that is lot 92. And so I did mention, I think we were going to go some rapid fire, but we've already gone, long, shorter than the last time we did it. But again, there's some really beautiful items, especially really classics. Lot 4 is the Mochemes Hashem el Ralbag from the River de Trento, 1560. The Ralbag's classic work of philosophy. Lot 5 is Mechach Memkar, Venice, 1602, Barav Haigoin. There's a Meneres Hamor, Vizchavu of Lot 7, Mantua, 1563. There's a Chuvas Ranach, Yoel ben Chaim, that is Constantinople, 1610. That's Lot 8. There's a post-Incanabula Smag, Lot 9, that's 1522. There is a Smak, is Lot 10, early Smak. There's some really early and Chashav Sfarim. There's Sefer Truma, printed by Bamberg, that's Lot 13. And again, just to show how many of and there's really beautiful copies as well that you can check out, and you can see there's a Sefer Ikrim, Rimini, 1522, really a beautiful copy. This is lot 19. Again, these are just the early items, so just to mention just a couple of them I want to mention here at the end. I didn't mention these really, we didn't have much to say on them specifically. There is a Chuvas Ramban from Bamberg, 1519, that's lot 25. There's a Chuvas Maram Lublin, which is Venice, 1617, this is lot 26. There's a Merkavas HaMishnah, as I read by Don Yitzchak Abarbanel. So the Abarbanel Merkavas HaMishnah is his commentary on Dvarim. And this is 1551 in Sabioneta, and also Italy. And there's that. There's a Chuvas Marik, printed by Bamberg, also lot 30. There is another Smag, lot 31. This is printed in Venice also. Lot 32 is a Chuvas Divrei Rivas. This is 1586. There's a beautiful Reishas Chachma. This is lot 33, Venice 1579, and beautiful leather bindings. So these are just running through it. There are some really chashuv svarim. There's a Ramban from Venice 1545, that's lot 35. And there's, again, just classics. Lot 37 is a Chovas Alvavis, Venice 1548. And then lot 38 is a Chovas Alvavis, Constantinople 1550, and it's printed from different manuscripts, a little different. So there's two different Chovas Alvavis. There's a Chuvas Rivash from Constantinople 1546, the first edition. This is lot 39. There's a Tolat Yaakov, as they write, lot 40. This is also Constantinople 1560. So I think, as you can see, there's a lot of classics here. Early Sfarim. And again, I'm just going to say beautiful editions, but if you look, you'll be able to see it when you look online, and you'll be able to see these early Sfarim. There's a Joshua Zoran, lot 50. This is the second edition. Lot 51 is the Kol Chayfetz, Mili. This is Venice 1552. So again, early Chuvas Harash is lot 52, and this is an early Chuvas Harash. So there's a number, again, a Kol Boy from Rimini, lot 53. There's another Rimini, lot 54. There's a Sefer Augur from 1524. And so on. But the point is, these are a lot of the classics. Just to mention them here, look at the catalog. There'll be a link in the show's notes to the catalog. And again, I want to thank Taj Art for sponsoring this podcast again. Check out the podcast, register to bid. You can register with the auction house. The auction is Sunday, April 7th at 12 p.m. So that'll be this coming Sunday. And again, check out the link and bid, and I want to thank them for sponsoring. But again, as I said at the beginning, even though this is something sponsored by them, I think that we had a lot of fun bringing you some really interesting historical nuggets and information and tidbits and anecdotes, and something that this gave us the opportunity, whether it was signatures or the copy or it was printed or something they said or whatever it was, and it's something that we wouldn't generally get to do. So I hope that you enjoy it, and any feedback is greatly appreciated, either again via WhatsApp or email svarimchatter@gmail.com.
Thank you very, very much. And again, wishing all the listeners well. It's always a great pleasure to spend time with you and connecting to our heritage, connecting to our Sfarim. That is our history. That's who we are. That's our identity. And especially in trying times, This gives us a little solace, a little nachama, and this is where we always go back to. All the best.